If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Are you ready, kids? Get your parents' permission, check your mailbox, and grab your shopping cart. It's time for the Adventures in Collecting podcast.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Dave. Welcome to Adventures in Collecting, where we talk toy news, culture, and hauls,
along with our journeys as collectors. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Adventures in Collecting. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Eric.
How's it going?
Good. That reminded me of our old, bad words intro for a second.
Oh, yeah, remember that?
Yeah. Friend of the pod, John Carlo, used to make fun of that all the time.
All the time. We never lived that one down until we got rid of it. So really exciting. We have another new guest with 2 weeks in a row. New guests.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've been on a tear like that. So this is really exciting. We have a really fun guest with us today. Timely too. We have some timely news with said guest. But as always, before we hop into our guest, let's take a little a quick look at some housekeeping here. It is still June. It will be June for another roughly 20 days as of the time of this recording. I think that goes down to like 14 days by the time this airs. We are still giving away a Labubu. Have a seat. As I'm going to keep making the same joke. This is Mace Windu's favorite version of Labubu because it tells you to have a seat.
I've never been more aware of Labubu since you brought Labubu home.
And we now have multiple Labubu. We have a Labubu multiverse in the house.
Oh, you found some at the mall near your house?
No, one of the little one's friends' moms found some. So,
okay.
But yeah, you can enter to win a Labubu on our Instagram page. So at AIC_podcast on Instagram, you have until June 30th to enter.
For the very low price of free.
Yeah, free. Free $99.
Unheard of in the Labubu verse, apparently.
In this economy?
In the Labubu economy.
The Labubu economy, yeah. So something else that somebody brought up, talking about this. So I did get a case of these from Vietnam. So I got a case of 6. Out of the 6 that were in that case, or the 5 other ones that were in that case, because obviously this is one of them, we pulled 5 unique Labubu. None of them were the one of 72, like cocoa brown colored one. So for what it's worth, maybe
you've got a chance at that.
You've got a chance. I don't know what the pull rate is on these. I do not know. But yeah, you have a 1 in 72 chance to get the ultra rare Chase brown Labubu. The one that I got is enjoying its life hanging off of my work backpack. It is the talk of the office. Be the talk of your office. At AIC_podcast. Look for the pinned post. Enter to win a Labubu.
Or maybe give it to your kid. Like, you never know.
Sell it, enjoy it, open it, whatever you want to do. It once you win it, You could do whatever
It's
you want to do
yours.
with it. It's yours.
The world is your oyster.
It sure is. It sure is. Yeah, so that's it for housekeeping. Um some big things coming up. Obviously, we're headed into con season, so San Diego Comic-Con will be here before we know it, which is a perfect segue into introducing this week's guest, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, today's guest is somebody whose work you've likely admired on shelves, on pegs, without even realizing it. His illustrations and designs on classic toy packaging for Hasbro and Toy Biz, as well as a multitude of pop cultural experiences from professional baseball and football, and even Hershey Park. This guy's work is everywhere, including the most recent announcement from Hasbro with their San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Ecto Glow Ghostbusters. Please welcome to the show our new friend, Harry Moore.
How's everybody tonight?
Hey, we're doing good,
Hey,
Harry.
We're good.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are super excited to chat with you. Big fans of your work. We'll be discussing that throughout kind of this episode here. But yeah, well, welcome to Adventures in Collecting.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm still kind of new to the social media thing. My Instagram is relatively new, and I felt like, I'm willing to do these things now. I'm in a better comfort zone and with doing these, and I think there's some interesting stuff that I can tell. It seems like that people collect these things and they like to know what's going on behind the scenes, and without giving too much away.
Yeah, for sure. And we've had
Absolutely.
other artists from toy packaging on the show before, and we always have a good time. And I will say, on behalf of myself and my brother, you are the only person with the Philly Fanatic in their profile that we enjoy interacting with.
Mhm.
So as two
Yeah.
Mets fans, but no, like, jokes aside, we are super excited to chat with you. So the first question that we ask all of our guests before we get into anything is, what do you collect, if you do collect anything?
That's a good question, and I do make this known on social media. It's something that I just kind of say, I throw it out there, and more so as like a hats off to the people that will get me to collect, because I don't have a lot of time, and I'm running out of space with having collected for years. Now it's like it's got to blow me away, or hit the right buttons with me for me to grab. And now with where I do a lot of retro things, and I'm being tasked with doing the retro things, and that resonates with me. And one of the best things that I've enjoyed, and it seems to fall every Comic Con, is NECA does the Glow Universal Classic stuff on the old Remco card, and I'm like, I would love to work on them. And I actually stopped by their booth last year. I'm like, you don't need me. You're doing a good job. Like, they're perfect. So, but I buy one, I buy two, I buy one to open, and get back to my hotel room in San Diego, and I'm turning off the lights and watch it glow. And that to me was a thrill, like a kid again, like to get the creature from the Black Lagoon, in a glow in the dark format. And they're really well done stuff. I don't collect any of their other items, but that retro Remco card with the glow in the dark features that comes out every Comic Con, and I think they just dropped. They announced that it's going to be the Bride of Frankenstein, so I'll be stopping by their booth. Yeah, I love that one. And that was such a thrill to go to Comic Con and get it in person, to stand in line and pick it up and tell them, that they do a good job on their stuff. I'm looking forward to. I think they're rumored. I think they're definitely happening. The Superman, the movie Christopher Reeve edition by Spin Master.
Yep.
I will probably grab those. Probably open a few of them. I think it's hilarious that the Lex Luthor with a toupee, and the accessories is like spot on. And it's like, why did it take like so many years for all the license, the companies that have had this, the DC license haven't done that, but whatever, that's, I can't control that, but I like seeing things like those. So, I don't, scour, well, we don't have Toys R Us anymore, but I don't really go out looking for much, but what hits me is when I see that retro thing, and the one that gets me is the NECA Remco cards, and I hope they keep doing them. I hope that they there's a few more in the Universal library that they can do.
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm so glad you called those out. That is, and shouts to Chris Ramo on the NECA team. He's their packaging guy. There, that is a labor of love. I love how thick those card backs are. They look beautiful on card and off card. But these are the primary, like my primary piece of my NECA collection. I have every single one of these. And same thing, I remember like I had the Remco ones, as a kid. I loved those figures. So being having a chance to get them kind of in the modern form, and yeah, I'm really excited for Bride of Frankenstein this year. Hopefully they have some left by the time they make it to New York Comic Con, because we have yet to have our first San Diego Comic Con experience.
Yeah.
So
it's life-changing. I did my first a couple years ago. Just we'll maybe get into that later, but busy and this excuses or whatever, and finally I was kind of dragged into it, and then it's like I'm looking for an excuse to go back. So thankfully the last few years Hasbro's had a reason for me to go out there, but for me it's those figures are well done, and it's the card, and that's the other thing I see online, where people purchase these Spider-Man retro cards that I work on, in addition to the ones that I don't work on, things like for the X-Men, the vintage Star Wars stuff. Is people love these card backs, and they're instant nostalgia, and and some of the things now with Ghostbusters. So it's not always something that I'm working on, but I think right now that all these toy companies have realized that nostalgia pulls at people's heartstrings and gets them to open their wallets. And Playmates does a great job with the turtle stuff. I mean, that card with the purple bricks and the turtle, it's iconic. And
yep.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, I know you can do different things, but it's like you throw out those first four turtles, Shredder and a foot soldier, April O'Neil, and you're golden.
So, talked a little bit about kind of the things that you like, but what got you into working in the toy industry? How'd you get your start?
I was an intern, and this kind of came full circle. I was an intern out of art school at the Philadelphia Phillies. And one of the years that I was there was the baseball strike. And so they didn't necessarily need me, or there's not much work for me as an intern. But in that area in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, well, right outside of Philadelphia was Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And that was the time in the late 90s, was the headquarters of Fleer Trading Cards, Tyco Toys, and NFL Films. So some of the people from the Phillies were like, well, we can hook you up with some of these people, and they all work together. So for example, there might be a toy packaging commercial. There might be a toy packaging where Fleer is inserting a card for the Tyco product, the trading cards, or there might be a TV commercial for Fleer trading cards that NFL Films was shooting. So it's this neat little hub of creativity. And the one that resonated with me was Tyco Toys, going into their offices and never having been, in a toy, building before. And it's like, it was, kid in the candy shop, and then seeing how they really do it, and seeing the old artwork on the walls. And, their thing at the time was the Tyco race car stuff. And, that's where, meeting Chris Metzger, who saw like, okay, this guy's got like some kind of potential. And at the time, it was like I was an idiot. Not say that I did anything like inappropriate or whatever, but I'm that kid that's like, look back like, boy, you said some stupid stuff. You should have kept your mouth shut and listened to what Chris had to say and some of these other people, instead of trying to do it your way. And nothing, earth-shatteringly horrible that I did, but it's like, that's a lesson for, artists or just in life in general, is that, listen to the people that are there already. Because I came in like, well, let's do this with Looney Tunes and let's do that. I'm like, you're an intern, dude. That's, but you do, and that's going to be a hard thing. I'm sure there's somebody right now that's an intern or entry level at Mattel or Hasbro, and they've got all of these ideas, and it's their heart is bursting to get that out. So that's kind of what got me. I was freelancing for or interning for these places, and whoever needed the work or whatever, and the toy industry bug bit me, and I really was torn, like going back to baseball or whatever it was, and then. So I learned the toy industry. I did some stuff where production art or instructional art, like on the back of a package, where the Bugs Bunny would have a carrot launcher rocket thing. So I did the grunt work, the down and dirty stuff. They're like, here, just do this real quick stuff for coupons that might have been inserted into a ViewMaster pack or whatever. So nothing really, really glamorous. I did get to help with package layouts and things, but I learned a lot. And that was how I learned like the industry, and not saying becoming an expert, but learning, how the toy company does catalogs, packaging, the prototyping, all the terms that we all know from the internet. I'm learning them, on the ground, and it's like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I had the chance to work there for a little bit, and then I met a gentleman at Fleer who his dream was to work at Disney. He ended up at Disney in Florida, and that's how I ended up in Florida with Disney. Was Disney made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. So in some ways, I walked away from the toy industry, and in the middle of a couple of decent projects that the Silver Surfer animated series on Fox, I think that was the last thing I turned in, was layouts and preliminary work for that. And I'm like, I'm going to go work in Florida and Disney World, and it caught some people by surprise. But then what Disney was bringing me was to do toy packaging for their theme parks and packaging for their candy and things like that. So when I got there at Disney World, I went to Tyco as an intern, and I'm like, I knew nothing, and I'm learning. I get to Disney World, and it was the exact opposite. They knew nothing about packaging. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know about small parts warnings, kosher symbols on candy. They relied heavily on me to bring that toy experience, which is very, very little. But I dove in, and I learned a little bit more about the toy industry, because they still produce stuff in China and things like that. And then that's where I got to meet some people from Hasbro and Mattel, because those companies then partner with Disney for toys and things like that. So when the opportunity came back around, I'm like, okay, went back to, working for myself and getting, those good, experiences that I had with Hasbro and Mattel. Those people are like, yeah, we've got work for you. We saw how you partnered with us in the Disney meetings and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, I didn't really realize they were watching that kind of stuff, but they're like, you left a good mark on a couple of managers there. So, if you, they gave me a couple test projects, and then it's now, then here I'm off to the races. And so, I did this thing where started off as a baseball team, intern, worked a little bit at toy companies, spent a decade at Disney World, and then now a decade plus working for myself. So I don't know, life is funny, but I think, I took this weird journey, but it really did prepare me for everything, that I do. And when the clients call me, to do certain things, it's like, yeah, he's a good fit for this based on, this life experience that I've got.
And it's really interesting, right? Like,
Very much so.
we say this about, a lot of our guests who have kind of like fallen into the toy industry, that like it's almost this like, sort of destiny or fate thing. But what I think is really interesting is, especially looking at like the timeline of your resume, right? in between some of those toy gigs and the toy work that you were doing at Disney, you were going, back and forth between sports. Like you were with the Phillies, and I know you're still doing work for them now, and with the Eagles too. So like, was it kind of like whiplash going between the toy world and the sports world? Are there a lot of similarities? Are there wholly different sets of challenges there?
That was a totally different thing. When I was an intern at the sports in Philadelphia, I was running what was called their Fanavision, which would be their big scoreboard. And back in the 90s, I describe it as a giant light bright. So in a way, it tied in with toys, but the technology way today where people use a Macintosh or whatever they may use, the Apple products or Photoshop, this was not Photoshop. This was a completely custom program that you were clicking light bulbs off and on with your mouse, click off, click on. And there was more to it than that, but it was not like a artist friendly program. And we were creating graphics. A lot of it was scanning in sponsor logos and things like that and cleaning them up for the format. So it was completely two different things. And being at the events to run these, so create these animations and then be at the game to run them at the right time when someone hits a triple and like, oh, I have an animation for a triple and I can run it and things like that. Now, today it's more so video than these old school scoreboard cartoons. But I really, really liked that. And, and I did miss it when I moved to Florida. One of the, first things I did was, go see the Phillies in spring training. And I left on good terms with the Phillies. And that's where, I'm telling so many stories out of chronological order. But there was the Philadelphia Phillies have a mascot, and despite what Mr. Met thinks, the Philly Fanatic is the best mascot.
Hey, listen, I will not argue with you there. When you think, even me as a Mets fan, when I close my eyes and I think sports mascot, the first mascot that comes to my mind is the Fanatic. I mean, that's just that's the way that is like the prototype. Yeah, it is the. I think the Fanatic is probably. And Dave, you're more of a sports guy than I am, but like I think you could easily make the argument that the Fanatic is like the most globally famous.
I would say so. I'd say Philly has two of the most well-known mascots out there right now with the Fanatic and Gritty. But I would
Gritty.
say so.
Yeah, I forgot about Gritty for a second.
I mean, if you think of like even think of like The Simpsons with the Capital City goofball, like it's based off the Fanatic. Like
100%.
Yeah.
I can't disagree with that, but I'm thinking about how we got there to the Phillies. I think about what we were just saying a few minutes ago. I basically disappeared from the toy industry for like almost a decade, and then got right back on the bicycle, and made it work. I left the Phillies on good terms, and it was just a couple of years ago they reached out to me, and I get the phone call, and I'm friends with a handful of people that are still there, and that's the thing that's amazing about that organization. And I don't have any other experience with any other pro MLB team, so I don't know how it works. I'd like to think it works that way everywhere, but I'm thinking it's the exception, not the rule. These people still work there, and they're like a family. And so that helped that I left on good terms. It gave them the time to say, hey, I'm going to go this Disney World, and didn't just quit and leave them hanging. I even helped to try to train the guy that would replace me at the game day duties and things like that. But I get this call at my phone, and it says Philly Fanatic, and I'm thinking he butt dialed me or somebody died. And he was like, well, we've got, and when I say somebody died, I thought like somebody that I worked with or something, or there was I don't know. I just thought it was so weird.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't answer it. I just thought, well, he's butt dialed me, So then 10 minutes later, calls back. So I'm like, well, let me pick this up. And I say, hey, Fanatic, how's it going? Well, yeah, how you been? And I've run into him over the years at spring training. We have a drink and stuff like that, and catch up on how things are going. And and since I've left, the Phillies have been good and bad. They won a World Series and lost a World Series. And he's like, well, this gentleman, he was the Fanatic artist, and he did all the merchandise art and stuff. And his name was Len Epstein. And I guess he'd been drawing the Fanatic. And I might be wrong on this number, but I think like since 1978, he'd been drawing the Fanatic for merch and for promotions for a long time. And he passed away, and they did not have a backup plan. And sometimes, that life does that. So they're like, you're on a short list, to do this. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, whatever. And he's like, you interested? I'm like, yeah, I guess. And not to say that I blew him off, but I was like thinking, why are you going to call someone in Florida to come do this? And I think I even said that on the phone. And he's like, well, you left on good terms. You're still part of the family. And he goes, you've got art experience, and we'll make it work. I'm like, you explain that to the Philadelphia media, or if someone questions it. He goes, no, we're just going to say, you're like the crazy cousin from Clearwater, which is their spring training. And he goes, it'll be good. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay. So, 5 days later, he calls me and says, well, congratulations, you've got the gig. And I'm like, I didn't even know, to say it was a gig or what was going on. And looking back on it now, I know kind of what happened. So he's like, well, so the first thing we need to do is we have a children's book that we give out every year. And, we give about 15,000 books. It's called Fanatic About Reading and X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, yeah, it sounds good. He goes, yeah, we know you've done some children's books and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I did some SpongeBob books and some Paw Patrol. And he's like, yeah, that's why you're the perfect fit. I'm so excited. I'm like, so, okay, so how much does it pay? When's it due? And the third part, I didn't even think to ask because I didn't think this would be the number. But he told me the money amount, and then told me he needs it in 3 months, and then told me it was 32 pages. And I'm like, you're got to be kidding. I'm like, and so I don't even know where to start with this. Like, well, first of all, when I said the money, I said, I can't touch it for less than a certain amount. And he said, well, Len did it for the love. I said, well, I do it for the money. 30 pages. I'm like,
yeah.
I said, I've done 16 and on the average, and a few 24s, but I had pretty good lead time to getting them done. So I thought about it, and I did it. I got the first one out the door at damn near killed me. But what my philosophy was, I just started getting up earlier. I started grabbing 2 or 3 hours a day in the morning, and that's been my life for the last 3 years. Is like December, January, and February, I'm up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at 2 a.m. just to do this. But so the payoff was that first year, 2022 or 2023, they fly me up to Citizens Bank Park. Well, I didn't know this was part of the gig. I guess Len would sign books every year at the giveaway. I was like, so that was kind of cool. I'm in a major league ballpark, and I'm sitting there before the gates open, and I'm at this table with a little thing behind me, and I'm like, no one's going to come see me. No one cares. This is going to be so embarrassing. Then the gates open, and it's just nonstop as kids are just dropping the book down to get it signed, and then out comes the Fanatic. Then it goes completely sideways, and it's just like, it was really neat experience. So then afterwards, when we're done, the Fanatic, and he actually, he did this, he said to me, he before he puts the costume on, he stands by the concourse where you come in, the turnstiles.
Yeah.
Says, I'm watching these kids get this book because some of these kids, you don't know, some they're underprivileged, some this is their first book that they've ever gotten that's theirs. Some kids, they've got all of them or whatever it is, or their parents have them. So he just watches it, and then he goes, that's something he looks forward to every year. And I thought, okay, whatever. But getting to know him, he really looks forward to this event every year. So at the end, when it's all done, we're all backstage and we're done. I'm like, why did you pick me, and not go with someone from Philly or whatever? And he goes, well, we did. We reached out to various ad agencies and artists that were Philadelphia, and they said they were all excited to do it until we told them 32 pages in 3 months. And they all backed away. Or he says, or the money was ridiculous. I said, now you see what I was saying. He goes, yeah, I see. So we've kind of ironed all that out, and now I'm on the third book, and I kill myself for like 3 months, but it is worth it to have these kids come up, and I'm like recognizing some of these kids for the third year, or
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
The parents they know me by name now. Not my name is on the book, but it's a really good feeling. And then kudos to the Phillies and the sponsor Xfinity, who pays for all these books. And I mean, I don't know what they pay per book, but if they're giving away 15,000, I mean, my guess is that's a $45,000+ investment, because the company that's printing them is not printing them for free. So there's a dollar investment for a giveaway. And to me, it's like, okay, this is pretty neat to be a part of. So so how we got to this long story that I've told you, but it's like the hats that I've gotten to wear and things like that. So it's not just toys for me. It's a lot of different things. But now I'm at the point in my life where if you call me and it doesn't interest me, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So if the Tampa Bay Lightning called me tomorrow and said they wanted a children's book, I'm like, yeah, sorry, they're not. So, yeah, that's how this. If you look on my Instagram, or you watch this podcast, understand that how there's this toy guy who does sports stuff. He was in the Philly area, and there was a company called Tyco Toys, which later got absorbed by Mattel. And I learned a little bit about trading cards, a little bit about I did a TV commercial with NFL Films for Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's a lot of different things that, as an artist, I think you can't just say, well, I'm just a toy artist. You go to school or art school to be an artist. And I'm lucky enough that I landed primarily in the toy industry, but that's not always what's going to happen. And there's other artists that I know that are in the industry, and they also do storyboards for TV commercials and things like that. So there's you want to, it'd be boring probably to do the same thing, although toys is not boring because there's always something different. But yeah, so that's how my Philadelphia Phillies story is.
Well, that's actually a perfect transition.
Yeah.
Because
and I was gonna say it's an upgrade from the Vet to Citizens Bank Park, having spent some time in my life down in that area and been to just about every venue. Yeah, for sure, it's a beautiful building. So
yeah. You mentioned being an artist and having to work across different forms of medium, and real quick before we jump straight back into toys for the rest of this. You've had the opportunity, like you said, over your career to work with some of these iconic brands and characters, including some pretty high profile mediums like a Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloon. Does a lot of pressure come with working in forms of medium like this, like knowing how many eyes are going to be on this iteration of the character and this version? Like what tell us a little bit about what it's like to just kind of work with all of these brands.
Well, going back, the Phillies book made me more nervous because it's an event and there's a hard deadline. So I was worried about the pressure. I'm glad they didn't tell me some of this stuff, because that would have been tough pressure. This one, I was told I guess the call went to a group of different Nickelodeon artists. So I wasn't the only one working on this. There were other Nickelodeon artists that were in-house, and for me as a Nickelodeon freelancer, like, can you take a stab at that? And the thing with the balloon, and part of what's going on here, was having the weight distributed evenly to make it a good balloon. So I guess what was happening, some of these balloons that the Nickelodeon team were doing, they were fabulous, but they didn't make a good balloon. So they just like, Harry, could take a stab at this. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I did a few, and I'm like, they're not going to pick mine. So there was no pressure. But then I got a call, and it's like, well, they want to go with one of yours. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I refined it slightly, but then Macy's does the work. Their team, figures out how to assemble it and all that kind of stuff. And they guided me through things where they liked, I had him, he was either holding a gift in front of him, or the fact that he was holding on to the hat. So there's not a lot of flying appendages and things like that. And how I think one of my concepts, he was on his knees opening a gift. So they talked me through, keeping him is on his knees, but and we'd like to wear. My thought was he was putting on the Santa hat. It kind of looks like when he's in the air, he's holding onto it for dear life. But yeah, there was no pressure on that because I didn't think I'm not, just like I said a few minutes ago with the Phillies. I'm like, well, they're not going to pick me. And I actually think that was when I went on my Disney interview. I'm like, well, they're not going to hire me. I guess if I go in with the attitude that it's like, they're not going to use mine anyway, they're going to use mine.
So yeah, also for our audio only folks, that's SpongeBob we're showing.
Yep.
But speaking of our audio people, but our listeners, our viewers, I think they probably best know your work from the Marvel Legends retro lines. So where do you get to flex creatively in something so rooted in paying homage to a specific past toy line?
My initial thought, going back to when I first got the call to do these, work on these, I think they picked me, the art director at Hasbro, because he knew I had worked on some Toy Biz stuff back in the day, and kind of had a feel for it. And this art director and I get along as well, so it was a good working relationship. And he knew I'd hit the deadlines because I think this got hit last minute. And I want to say when they called, they told me at the time, and I don't think this has been discussed, but Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and Iron Man. And so in my mind, when the initial indication, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a Toy Biz tribute line. This is pretty cool. I thought, for maybe some anniversary. So I was, going to do an Iron Man card, a Spider-Man card, and that was early discussion. And that's not quite what it became. I was working on Doctor Doom first, which ended up in the white shipper box. And I forget what exclusive. I think he ended up being New York Comic-Con exclusive or something like that. And then it was transitioned to doing these 6 Spider-Mans. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do 6 Spider-Mans and it's going to be done. But now we're really deep into these characters. And I give the fans the credit for keep buying these things, is why Hasbro keeps making them and why I'm able to keep working on it. But I thought when I turned in that first wave of 6 and the Doctor Doom, that was it. I was done. COVID wrecked a little bit of my plans because I found out later that some of these things I was working on were to be Comic-Con exclusives. The Iron Man, the Pulse Cannon, and the big pink box. And I believe the Venom and the Black Shipper were supposed to be Comic-Con exclusives. And I was like, two years in a row that I had an opportunity to do something with Hasbro at Comic-Con, and they became Pulse exclusives, and they did very well. The fan response was great, but for me, I was a little bit like, darn it, I felt like Charlie Brown a little bit, where it didn't quite work out. But that's silly in a way to think that way because of how important these things were. But it's just like my shot at Comic-Con got wrecked by a disease. But we'll jump back to that in a little bit. But when I got the Spider-Man gig, they wanted the purple card and all that stuff, and I'm like, my goal, and as a kid, and even the art director from Hasbro, we talked about this. You hated when an artist changed during a toy line. So and that's one of the things that Hasbro tries to do is keep things consistent using the same art. So, keeping a good line look. So we went back and looked at those first wave of the Spider-Man cards, and I'd known from knowing a little bit about, what I'm working on, is that these are mostly done by, I think it was a studio called Temner Design, and Neil Adams Continuity Studios were providing the character art, and that was the case with, I think, the Spider-Man cards and the Fantastic Four, and it was all overseen by a guy named Chris at Toy Biz, as far as the packaging, and I got to know Chris through Chris Metzger, and going into the Toy Biz offices and seeing this stuff and things like that. Instant fan of all these things, and I felt with talking to Hasbro about this is, to me, this was a love letter to Toy Biz, because those cards, of which I've gotten to recreate a handful of them, but the X-Men card, the Spider-Man card, the Fantastic Four, the Iron Man, the Ghost Rider, they're all iconic. And this was one small group of people at Toy Biz were managing this, and they were just banging out hit after hit. The toys were great. Nothing against the toys. I mean, that's really why people buy them. But the packaging, obviously, by the fact that they're now being re-released, or we're redoing them for Hasbro, they're iconic. So my thought was to make them look like they were done 1996 to 98 or whatever it is, for the Spider-Man stuff. And I even did a test because Hasbro asked, we'll do it with a little bit of comic book style coloring, more rendering, shine, and things like that. And I really didn't want to go there. And Marvel has to look at everything. Marvel came back and said, nah, because I did where I said this, give the client what they want, and then also give them what you want to do, and maybe it'll meet somewhere in the middle. So I gave Hasbro what they thought it should be, and I did it the old school way. And Marvel said, well, if you're doing it retro, keep the art simple, like the old school stuff. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm glad that Marvel saw it that way, that these are truly not supposed to be a reinvention of the wheel. And, in fact, that there's people on social media that've seen some of the first cards and they just think it's the old Toy Biz art.
Yep.
Everything was recreated. The Spider-Man logo, the Spider-Man crouching on the top. And a lot of it was, either Toy Biz didn't have the art, or if it was on transparencies, or, the resolution wasn't good. And if you were to grab an old Toy Biz card from the 90s and grab one of these new Hasbro cards, like it's almost like, because of technology over the years, Hasbro is printing in high definition. It's like 4K, watching a movie on VHS versus watching it on, streaming or DVD or Blu-ray now. So I'm holding these old cards from the Fantastic Four and the Iron Man, and you can really see the moire pattern and the dot, and some of the ink bleed, and it's like, wow, that these things that Hasbro print are really, really sharp. So a lot of the imperfections would be seen more obviously. So it was the right thing to do, to recreate the background, the logo, and then the character. So to me, what was neat was when fans were like, well, they just pulled the Toy Biz art out of the vault. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. But if I fooled you, that means that I did the job correctly, because this is what I wanted. I wanted someone who has these figures still to be able to display them alongside of them. And that was one of the neat things, I guess, at Toy Fair that year, that was part of their Toy Biz display, is that Hasbro had retro cards, along with vintage samples. Maybe somebody's collection, or got them off of eBay, and you darn near couldn't tell. And you probably can't really tell the difference, other than the fact that the cards are larger. But that was when you said getting the flex or whatever. I didn't want to flex. I wanted these to be like, okay, I wanted someone to think we were using style guide art or something from the 90s run, and then that got into, okay, well, there's some characters that didn't exist. So for the ones that I'm recreating, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, but then changing it here and there to match the Hasbro deco, because Hasbro does ask, we changed the colors, the paint colors to match the toy a little bit better. And then we got into where, okay, we have to create some characters that didn't exist. So that's where I get the flex. But again, that's harder, because you're trying to make sure it looks like it still fits in the line, and there's not one that stands out like, oh, that doesn't look right. So I keep this big master file while I drop each one into it, and to compare, to kind of make sure the line weights are the same and the coloring is the same. And it's a simple, almost like, not quite vector, but soft airbrush. And then watching the Toy Biz stuff over the years is that, for the most part, that when they used this true purple card with the cityscape, the artwork was very, very consistent. And then later on, with some of the lines, they did change artists and things like that, which, as a kid, even I'm picking that up. But that was one of the things that Hasbro, as art directors, were like, let's keep, this consistent as long as we can. So, I'm glad for this one. I don't have to flex too often, but as with She-Hulk or some other things that it's an opportunity to do something new, for the line, but make it still feel like, well, that could have fallen right out of 1998.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing about this particular wave too, you mentioned bringing characters that don't exist or didn't exist in this form, into that style, and you're almost kind of so well oiled and kind of making your own, for the lack of a better term, like style guide for these. For me, it was seeing something like this, right? Like where Kane was featured on this Toy Biz packaging back in the day, something that you had an opportunity to work on in this style, taking this and turning it into this, and it's like, oh man, imagine if Kane was in the 90s animated series ultimately. And it's really cool to see that progression, seeing him on the back of a package here looking almost more like he does in the comics, and then getting that line look, like you said, with like the consistency with the rest of the characters. It's just really cool.
And I think that's right now Hasbro's approach, where this line kind of went in two directions, and that was one where I helped them out with the concepts and the layouts for that. Was the other Spider-Man card we're called, like the Neo
Modern
Pro, yeah,
yeah
is, so if it's someone, because I guess these cards sell pretty well, and it was, how do we find, and Marvel was right in this, that some of these characters, it didn't make sense for them to be on the retro card. It would probably be forced. So Marvel, they've got their eye on this, and they're smart and a lot of the decisions that they make with this, and they're protecting their brand and things like that. So I think that was a good move to go to the Neo retro card, as we developed it, that's what we called it, and that's how I think Hasbro approaches it, is that there's a very good chance that if the animated series kept going a few more years, Kane would have probably shown up as a character on the show, and he still fits as the Tombstone, and well, I think Tombstone did show up on the show, but you guys know, you collect this stuff, that there are some characters that, like, Spider Boy probably doesn't make sense on the true toy.
Hollow's Eve is another one. Yeah. Yep.
That was better on the modern retro card, and we tried to use the purples, and I actually did a sketch of having a little Spider-Man on the top of the logo. I think that didn't get used, but that trying to make it still feel like the same flavor. So I believe it works, and I think that's the goal when they do these lines, that there'll be 3 modern and there'll be 3 like retro Toy Biz tributes. So and so there's a lot of thought that goes behind the scenes, and maybe fans may like, oh well, I hate this version or that version, but I think it's the right thing, because it allows Hasbro to go deeper into the Spider-Man universe, and not allows Hasbro to go deeper and not have Marvel just tell them no, because it doesn't make sense on a Toy Biz card. So I feel like it's a good compromise.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
This segment is brought to you by our friends at Chubsy Wubsy Toys. A traditional mom-and-pop toy store in Little Falls, New Jersey, Chubsy Wubsy Toys brings you the best new toys from the brands you love without the hassle of pounding the pavement searching for them at larger retail stores. Visit them in person at their brand new home at 101 Newark Pompton Turnpike, Suite 1 in Little Falls, New Jersey, or online at chubsywubsy.com. That's CHUBZYWUBZZY.com. And tell them Adventures in Collecting sent you.
If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And now, back to the show.
Yeah, even like the Ghost Rider one, as a Ghost Rider fan myself, like that one was just, it took me right back to those. But speaking of Spider-Man, staying in Spider-Man, the VHS sets in particular were so good. Did Hasbro come to you with the idea completely in place, or did you help them get there as far as like the VHS idea?
They came to me with the closed box. I think at the same time they were doing the X-Men ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they had hit yet, but and I don't even think that they had showed me, because I think they didn't want me being influenced too much by what they were doing on the X-Men ones. But they did. There was an idea with on the one side panel where the characters are looking at each other on the side of the VHS box. They said that they wanted to do that as well. So I took the approach with this, that as if this was a style guide, the product, something that you would have seen on a Blockbuster video shelf um, back in the day. And um, yeah, I'm not sure where the term VHS, or if that came up, because that's what they feel like, but that was not anything that I contributed whatsoever. I contributed like the layout, like how we're gonna. I did a lot of different concepts for it, but it was like, okay, here we can sneak the purple cityscape back in, and I'm like, well, I don't want these characters just floating in outer space, because the VHS boxes sometimes felt more like a scene. So I'm like, well, let's take that platform from the lower left of the cards and ground that so they're up on the top of and have it in the same angle as the cityscape behind it. And I think that was a very Toy Biz type solution. And that's the hat that I try to wear. Like, what would Toy Biz have done in that time period? So that way, when we got to the point where we're doing Aunt May and things like that, that it would, she would not just be floating in outer space. And then people have asked about the numbering on the side, and I remember a conversation where we were going to be numbering them. It was like each box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if a certain box didn't come in on time, it might throw it off. Or there was discussion as well as that it might give away how many are being done, and that was like something that I did on my earlier runs of these. Is I was trying to even have the webs line up, so if you put all 6 on the side of your shelf and line them up, that it would form one image, or at least the webs would connect. But now they totally had this plan, because at the time Hasbro was looking to reduce the amount of plastic and packaging, and so that was, from what I understand, it was, we're going to go with X-Men. And I think there was a retailer that was Disney Store or somebody like that was willing to pick up in a box, and what we're going to call the VHS format. But I tell you, these were a lot of fun, because I like the Toy Biz cards, but the box was always neat to do something where the challenge was to put that Toy Biz hat on and have them almost like they're in a scene, but they are still style guide type poses that they'll work on the side panel, like you see there, and feel like something Toy Biz would have done with the art. So, and it just looks nice where they're kind of interacting. I thought the Green Goblin one came out pretty nice too. And then the other thing, talking about this, managing, not that I manage it, but trying to keep, some consistency and the logic, why some of these decisions are made, is that, again, the Toy Biz cards are, like I said, love letter to Toy Biz. So we're trying to make the art look like it's the Toy Biz art per se. But in the VHS, that allowed us to try to make it feel more like the animated series. So the Green Goblin and the VHS and the Mary Jane were more on model with the cartoon at the time, which is what they did on the VHS boxes as well.
Yep. Yeah, this has been the VHS line. I think as somebody who has every single one of the like animated series releases, including that Venom that you had brought up. This is like my Spider-Man, like was the animated series. So I had some of these VHSs, like the episode compilation VHSs back in the day, and it is just like it felt like picking those up again, except instead of getting to watch them, I had toys inside, which was win-win.
Yeah, that was the goal, and they still can sit together, mostly because of that big purple cityscape and how I handled the characters. But Hasbro definitely steered the look, like Aunt May, Mary Jane. Perfect example is that when Toy Biz did them, things were different back then, and I'm not sure with the timing of how quick they were trying to get things done, but I think Neil Adams and their group were doing, the artwork based more on what the comics were and things like that. So, but to me, I try to keep them separate, different hats, the VHS and the retro card. But if you've got them in a collection, they'll still work as if in 1996, 7, or 8, you purchased a Toy Biz package and you picked up one of those VHS packs and popped it in and watched it. So there was a lot of Spider-Man stuff in that 90, 98, era where everybody had, not say everybody had the license, but there was, Burger King did toys, and that logo was everywhere.
Yep.
So that was my goal, is to make sure that someone who doesn't know any better may pick this up and like, oh, I didn't see this VHS pack when I was a kid, and then realize, oh, there's toys in it.
Well, speaking of Hasbro, and we've talked kind of at length here about Marvel Legends. This past weekend was Ghostbusters Day. The day where we celebrate the four heroes of New York City, saving the world from a spectral invasion. But there was some San Diego Comic-Con news that came out of that. You are back in the world of Ghostbusters with the Ecto Glow heroes. So tell us a little bit about what you had to do here for this line, as there's a lot of familiar artwork for people that are definitely fans of the old Kenner line, but there's some newness here too. So what are we looking at?
Well, I'll go back to how I got involved with it. Is again similar with like the Marvel Toy Biz stuff. The Kenner art wasn't available, so the Ecto one that came out a few years ago and a few Ghosts, the artwork wasn't available. Like, hey, can you recreate this? And that was one even more painstakingly difficult project, was getting like the Fearsome Flush and the Bug-Eye Ghost and Fright Features and things like that. Then eventually, the product developer at Hasbro is like, I'd really love to go into some stuff, where we're doing some new art. So we did the cards for Ecto Glow, and I've been sitting on this, news for almost a year. We were discussing this at Comic-Con last year, and I think even then we knew, just we couldn't tell anybody that we were going to do these for Comic-Con. And brilliant on Hasbro's part, because again, I had the toys, or had toys or whatever it would be, we all did, but I was that packaging guy. I kept the packages, I kept the cards and stuff like that. So I don't really think about certain things, and when the product developer is like, I'm going to convince them to do Ecto Glow, and I'm like, okay, but then when the thing was, they're the original molds, so the tooling investment wasn't huge. Well, I don't think that way. Like, I'm thinking about, I'm going to make these packages look good. You worry about the toys. I don't worry. I mean, I want the toys to look good, and I will try to do certain things. If you come in and say, especially with the Marvel ones, I'll get the photo of the toy in a grayscale model, and then sometimes later color, and then tweak my color to match the figure as best as I can. But in these cases, I'm like, same process as the Toy Biz. Let's make these look like you had the Kenner art on hand. Let's get these as close as possible to what Kenner did. Even as crazy as that hand is, that's what was on the Kenner card, back in the 90s. So I'm like, let's do this. And he was all on board. And there's a trust, I think, at this point now that Hasbro has with me. And then they called him like, well, if it's for Comic-Con, let's do something special. So he came up with the idea of putting him in a shipper. And he said, so this is our first opportunity to do something that's not a recreation. That's a pose from the animated series, and he said, imagine if this reference art was given to the ad agency in Cincinnati that did these in the 90s. If you gave them that as a starting point, but make it Ecto Glow and make it look like the way they do, on the toy packs. I'm like, okay. So as flawed as they may have been, I adore them. I mean, those guns are garish with the bright blue and the bright pink.
Yeah.
But that's what they were, and I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, and the thing is, going back to the Toy Biz stuff, going back to Kenner's, these were done traditionally. There's no computer, I
Yeah.
mean, the beginning of the computer age, but there was someone doing these by hand, traditional illustration, and I came in the era of computers were coming in, traditional illustration still mattered. So I'm kind of like the best of both worlds. So I took my learnings from traditional illustration into the computer, and trying to think, well, how would I do this traditionally, and using what's available in Photoshop or whatever, and making some brushes and things like that. But yeah, so the shipper was the first step into doing something that's not quite a recreation, and then putting all four of them in the box, for Comic-Con, that way, you've got something to kind of keep them safe when you bring them back from San Diego, and then that looks in the box itself looks good. And I haven't revealed like the there's the back of the box and stuff like that. I'm kind of waiting. My thing is with Hasbro, can't show stuff until it's out there. So I was only able to show what they kind of had revealed on Ghostbuster Day, which the front of the packs, yeah, basically that was all that was safe for me to reveal. But what they surprised me was they showed the game plan for what was coming up, and they showed the Ecto Glow vehicle, and so that would be the second piece where we did a custom piece of art, and the whole car glows in the dark, and it's a little bit of homage to there was an Ecto 1A where you could put stickers on it and stuff like that with slime and things like that. So that was one where it's like, okay, let's make this feel like it was a Kenner piece of art from the 90s. And then as those things that are being teased in the other piece, that's our approach, is that we're going to keep doing these things like they're from the 90s. But yeah, going back to not saying that there isn't a cost involved in making these, but it didn't dawn on me that when Hasbro recreated the first 4 Ghostbusters for Walmart a few years ago on the Kenner cards, that the tooling then at that moment existed for the Ecto Glows, because I didn't really think that, well, yeah, that they're the same mold. And looking back on it now, I should have known that, because I had all the Batman figures that were the same Batman. They just painted Safari Batman, Arctic Batman, Jungle Cruise Batman, whatever, that pole dancing Batman. They just came up with a different paint job and went with it. So I'm like, yeah, that's pretty smart. And I think that they had to, obviously probably sculpt a few things like the Ecto masks that were on them. And going back to when they did these for Walmart was the retailer, but when they did the Ecto 1 and how much money on the aftermarket that Ecto 1 vehicle is in the box, and for Hasbro to give fans that box, so even if you had a vintage one, you could now display one, you could buy one for your kid, and the price point was under $30 when that came out.
Yeah.
The Ecto 1 for Walmart. I'm like, that was a really good deal. And same thing here. I mean, there's probably people that are going to be upset that their Ecto cards may drop in value, which, I mean, I don't think so, because you can tell the difference. There's things we had to do with small parts warnings and stuff, and things like that to move to fit the current requirements by 2025 standards. But with that being said, I think these cards, if you find some of these guys on the card, they're $500 or more.
Oh yeah.
This gives collectors, the term holy grail for Ghostbusters. I mean, this is so cool that Hasbro, and I'm just a small part of it, that's so cool that Hasbro is bringing these back. And, if you're a Ghostbusters fan, you absolutely have to get them. I mean, I would get them if I didn't work. It'd be one of those things where if I wasn't working on them, if someone said, oh, they're going to do the Ecto Glows on retro cards, I'm like, yep, I'm buying them. If I didn't work on that, that would be one of those ones like the Remco stuff. It's like, I would be all over it.
Yeah, they're super cool. So speaking of San Diego Comic-Con, this past San Diego Comic-Con was your first Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con experience. So what was it like at the Hasbro booth and doing like the signing and all that stuff?
Well, this actually be my second. The first one was the year before, and that was the Hollywood writer's strike. So I got a call from Hasbro, and they're like, someone from Hasbro that doesn't usually call me personally, and was like, "Are you going to Comic-Con, by the way?" I'm like, "No, but you asked for a reason. So what, you don't, just call somebody and say, hey, you going to Comic-Con without wanting to know what, there's an ulterior motive." So they were like, we need some more content because of the actors strike or Hollywood strike, that their hands were tied, Marvel as well as Hasbro, with what they could do with celebrities and certain things. And again, I'm not a celebrity, so I actually thought, much like I said earlier with the Phillies, I was going to sit there and be embarrassed. But people came there and they're like, "Trust me, Harry." They're like, "It's a freebie, and it's Spider-Man, and it's Comic-Con." So I signed nonstop for however long they had me on the clock. They printed like postcards of the VHS covers for the Spider stuff, and they were a freebie, and I signed them nonstop. They turned out really nice. The next year, I don't think I had an exclusive, which would have been last year, but I went out and was talking with the Ghostbusters team about, and I think I did a video on the Hasbro Pulse channel. So if you go back and see that, you'll basically realize now we were foreshadowing what is going to be this year's exclusive. So I'm really looking forward to having, because this year will be the first time I've had probably a true product. Whereas when I was out 2 years ago, I was signing postcards, which nothing against that. That was like super cool. And there were people that came up on the second or third day, and they had product that they had.
Oh, awesome!
Signed. Nice. They showed up with their own product for me to sign.
Very cool.
One guy, he drove from Los Angeles with a bag full of stuff for me to sign, and so flattering, to have someone that threw everything in a bag and tracked me down to have me sign it. So this year will be, to have a real product that's there. I'm curious to see. I'm basically going to be hanging around the Hasbro booth, making circles around it, watching to see, the reaction, which again, I was talking to the product developer today. I said, just everything I'm reading in the social media comments, there's not a lot of negativity. I said, everyone's really stoked about these. And I said to him, I didn't know you were revealing the Ecto car. That I thought we were going to reveal that at Comic-Con, and there was a discussion about that, and these things are out of my control. I don't, not that I don't care, but I'm just like, okay, there's things that get done for a reason. And I said, well, I think it was kind of a good idea, because by showing that timeline of those 4 items or whatever, you're showing the collectors and the fans there is a commitment from Ghostbusters. Because I had read a few things online that people were like, well, they're just, they're casting the Ghostbusters in Ecto Glow, which again, it took me 30 years to figure out. But some fans know that, okay, those are the same molds, and all they had to do is, cast them in glow in the dark. So there were some fans that were like, you read the chatter online, like, that's probably a one and done. I think it was smart to show the vehicle, to show, okay, there's a commitment. I said, it's like, you've got the Batmobile, you're showing them there's going to be more than just 4 figures as a quick, Comic-Con exclusive, and then there's nothing else. So, and the fact that there is a game plan, and, and we talked about this, him and I, forever. It's like, who doesn't love glow in the dark? I mean, and you throw glow in the dark on a toy. I mean, just to me as a kid, it's like I had to have it. And then Hasbro's told me stories that, like, and think about this. I didn't realize it until they told me this, that glow in the dark was either the kiss of death or what you did when a line was on its last leg. So I guess Jurassic Park did it. Batman did. You just
Swamp Thing.
Swamp
Terminator.
Thing. When it got the Turtles, everyone did it. So I'm like, I never thought of it that way. I mean, I like the Ghost Rider glow in the dark stuff, which is what the retro card is based on. So to me, I think glow in the dark gets a bad rep. As long as it's, I thought maybe, because again, where I disappeared from toys for a few years, I thought, well, maybe it was a toxic chemical. Maybe that's why there's no glow in the dark toys anymore. But I guess there was this thought process that glow in the dark was a taboo, whatever. Like, so
a stigma.
Yeah. And I didn't really realize that. And then I go back and look at it, I'm like, yeah, basically everybody's from the 90s, their last wave was the glow in the dark wave.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, we have 2 more questions for you. But before we ask those 2 kind of final questions, there is one other thing that we wanted to cover, and something that actually means a lot to me and my family. One of our favorite places to go. We already talked about Disney World, but you're also doing artwork for Hershey Park because you're everywhere.
Yeah. I'm dependable, I guess. And then going back to what I tell kids or people that want to work in the industries, don't burn bridges and things like that. So there's a gentleman who's an art director at Disney, and he left Disney. I think he went to Cranium for a little bit, and then he ended up at Hershey. Ron Burridge was his name. Well, he's not past tense. He's still around. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but that was one of those examples of not burning bridges. And he's like, Harry, we'd like to refresh these characters a little bit and bring some of the Disney polish and magic to them. And again, one of those things where I just thought it was going to be a couple of characters has turned into something where, I mean, it's on billboards in the city. It's on the banners in the city. You come into the town and it says, "Welcome to Hershey, the sweetest place on earth." And it's Mr. Hershey waving. Well, they have names, whether the world knows it or not, but that's Hirsch, Reese, and Miss Kiss.
Yep.
Those are the 3. That would be their Mickey, Minnie, and Donald, or Mickey, Minnie, and Goofy, however you want to look at it. But there's other characters, Twizzler and Jolly Rancher, that we've done some work with. But the core group is the 3 big ones. Like basically, I guess honestly, it'd be more like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. So it's Hirsch, Reese, and Miss Kiss. So yeah, they just I do whatever, for the most part that they call and ask me to do. And again, that was another one of those things. I think when Ron and I were discussing it, he knew, weren't you from the Philly area? I'm like, yeah, and every summer I went to Hershey Park. So there was an affinity for that. If you look online, you can find that these mascots were abominations decades ago. They're scary looking. And so they're really good looking now. Their mascots are like Disney quality now. So Hershey does really good job with their attractions, and so the artwork gets used by the city, it gets used at Chocolate World, and it gets used at the Hershey Park. So that's kind of neat. And that, when I went to visit the new art director, Matt, who's there, he's like, I was making my first trip as an adult or as having done work for them. He goes, I want you to be prepared for, he goes, I don't think you're going to be able to be prepared for the impact your art has. And I'm like, I don't know what he's getting at. He's just it's going to be mind blowing. And it was like, I'm driving in from Philly because I flew into Philly and did the Phillies event, and then decided, well, I'll rent a car and drive to Hershey. And there's the billboards and there's the banners in the street, and then all the signage is utilizing these characters. And it's like, wow. And it was humbling, if anything, to see your work on a billboard. And you asked earlier about pressure. I'm glad I didn't know that like the whole city, I mean, Hershey uses it on their social media. It's their little social media icon, maybe one of these characters at different times. Or if I do them in a holiday outfit for Easter or Christmas, they're grabbing those on things in addition to all the merchandise that they're moving with it. And to me, what it is, going back to Ron allowing me to do this, and then Matt, now they're trusting me, is that I'm doing their merchandise art, well, whatever art I'm doing on, I don't know what it always ends up on, but I'm bringing that world-class quality to it, that it doesn't look like some, well, just theme park stuff. There's
Yeah.
this competes. It looks as good as Disney merchandise, and with, let's say, a little bit of effort. There's a lot of effort, but like a lot of it also is the material they're putting their shirts on and things like that. So little things different from the toy industry is this the care and the quality of the materials that they're sourcing for mugs, t-shirts, hats, or whatever it is. And we created this brand guide, which is what these two guys are from, to make sure that whoever's doing a keychain or whatever is using the right colors and the characters in the right format, and they're not mixing and matches poses and and a lot of the stuff that I learned from Disney that prepared me for being able to work for Hershey. So yeah, I look forward to going out there again. It's a great town. There's a lot of stuff to do in the area, historic stuff, and again, I think about Disney. You go to Disney, you ride rides, you go wherever. You go to Hershey's Chocolate World, and there's free candy. There's samples. So it's like, wow. And one year I was out there and I got to try the pink lemonade Kit Kat before probably most of the world had tried it. That Matt had some in his office, and it's like, he wouldn't let me take a picture or nothing. I had to wait until I think it got announced like July 4th, that year, and he's like, you can't tell anybody that you saw these or ate these or whatever. Or I think the big thing was that I didn't take a picture. So I'm like, yeah, I ate it. It was good. It tasted. I didn't get as much as the lemonade, as much as the pink, so it almost tasted like strawberry Kit Kat. But it's like you see these flavors. Well, you don't. I'm saying you don't see these flavors. If you go to Hershey's Chocolate World, you're going to see flavors of Kit Kat you've never, or Hershey bars that you're not going to see at your regular grocery store. And the other thing that's worth the trip is that Reese's peanut butter. You can buy Reese's peanut butter in a jar in the grocery store. It is not the peanut butter they put in the cups. And they have a thing at Hershey's Chocolate World called Build a Cup. And I get it. You can have it with the peanut butter, and you can have it with sprinkles, and you can have it with this. I get triple peanut butter, and I bring that thing home, and I make it last as long as I can, because it's the real, when you bite into it, it's the real peanut butter from inside the cup.
Yep.
So that's worth the trip.
We absolutely did that when we were there. Dave has ordered Reese's directly from the factory.
Yep, same thing. Yep.
but yeah, no, I honestly, I was blown away. We're in New Jersey. When we want to go to a local theme park, we're very close to Six Flags. It's an easy trip for us. I wanted to bring the kids somewhere different one year, and we went to Hershey Park, and I was so blown away at the level of immersion there. Like, it was not what I was expecting. I was expecting your typical roller coaster park, just theme park. And we were totally blown away. And like you said, it's actually kind of vindicating to hear that some of that magic, for the lack of a better term, right, is coming from somebody who has Disney experience, because it's palpable there. I mean, you can feel that kind of same level of connection. Like we kept saying, as people who have been to Disney a bunch of times, we kept saying the whole time we were there, it's like, oh, this is kind of like being in Disney. You're really, when you're in Hershey, you are in Hershey. Whether you're staying at the Hershey Hotel and you've got chocolate, scented shampoo and soap, and the colors, all the Pantone colors in the room, the browns are Hershey chocolate brown. It was very immersive. So lots of attention to detail there. Yeah,
they do a great job. And the last plug for Hershey, if you did the stuff your cup, you also have to do you build a bar. It's the Hershey bar, and it's almost like educational. It takes a while, because you're going from station to station, and you're picking your chocolate, you're picking your filling, and then you're picking your wrapper. But you're watching this candy bar go on a conveyor belt journey, and then at the end you get to pick a wrapper. And I think my art is on some of the wrappers that you get to choose. But that's, to me, some of the best souvenirs that I've seen at theme parks. Or there's a book that we did for them called Cupcake the Cow, which is about this the tour ride, which is about how the chocolate is made, and it's the perfect souvenir. It ties in completely with the attraction, and of course, then building your own Hershey bar. It's like, how do you? I mean, it's one thing to go and like, oh yeah, I bought the giant Hershey bar. Now do the tour. You get to put the mesh lunch lady hat on, and you put the apron on. Like, absolutely do it. And this, to have the chocolate bar come out and it's warm. So not to knock where you said you buy it from the factory. I've done that as well. But when you go, make sure, you're getting that chocolate bar right off the line, and then you're destroying it,
Yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So all of your entire scope of your career, we're coming to the end here, the episode, but the entire scope of career, you've worked on so many different brands across so many different forms of media. What's like the one character or brand that, like, if you could pick something that you've never had a chance to work on? And I know you mentioned the Remco thing up front, so I'm not going to let you take the easy out there and pick that again. But if there's one character or brand that you could work with, what would that be?
That's really hard, because at some point I think I've touched almost all of them, even, and so I'd have to almost get more specific, like doing like a Universal Monsters toy packaging or something like that. Because it's one of my clients is NBC Universal, so once in a while I get to dabble in Universal Monsters, and it may not necessarily be toys, or I'm working on stuff with Jurassic Park. But the one that would probably get me to pump the brakes for everything would be Planet of the Apes. Something with the old school. I mean, no disrespect to whatever they're doing now, which, I mean, I've watched them, but the ones with Woody Harrelson, I think. They're on cable, but it's like, to me, it was like watching on Saturday afternoons the reruns of the Charlton Heston one, and the reruns of the animated series and things like that. And being from the area, like my great grandparents or something, I had connections to almost the New York area, so I knew Channel 9, 11, 5.
Yeah,
I know. I spent a lot of times at that Six Flags in Jackson, New Jersey. I think that's the same we're talking about. So I split summers in North and then in South Jersey. So I think Channel 9 or 11, one of them at my great grandmother's or grandmother's would Planet of the Apes marathons, before there was like Planet of the Apes marathons became a thing.
Yep. WPIX.
That was 11, right?
Yep.
Yeah, WOR.
WOR was 9. The Fox was 5. CBS was 2. ABC was 7.
Yep. Wow.
NBC was 4.
ABC was 7, yeah, and NBC was
4.
4, yeah. Mm-hmm. And CBS was 2, yeah. I mean, I'm going back decades, but I mean, yeah. So that hit me hard, because up there, WOR Channel 9 came here, high school or whatever it was, college, to ride the King Kong ride at Universal Studios Florida. The pre-show had the WOR TV broadcasters, and it's like the one older gentleman, like, I think he's still on the air. I'm like, I would ride that ride when I got homesick. I would ride the King Kong ride. When I'm in the New York, New Jersey area, I would ride the King Kong ride at Universal Studios. I could stand in that queue line and not care how long it was, because it felt like and it looked like the New York area.
Oh man, I miss Confrontation.
When I was a little kid, I thought that was the coolest thing, because I was like, that's like that's 2 towns over. Like, that's.
Yep. So that's where the Planet of the Apes marathons at grandmom's would be like, that would be something I would love to work on. I mean, I don't know what I could or couldn't contribute, but I think there's a passion for it. But yeah, for the most part, I've gotten to live my dream by really die tomorrow. If I died tomorrow, like the Spider-Man retro line was, that was like, how do you top that? And then having Hasbro trusts me enough to have, when I have the opinions of like, let's keep it as vintage as possible. And I think for the most part, people in the industry or have a passion for it, they think the same way. Like when the guy from Ghostbusters asks for this stuff, I'm like, it makes total sense. That's exactly how I would have done it anyway. So there's no, I don't know if you hear horror stories, the old school stuff with writers and artists, clashing over the script of a comic book, whatever. There's none of that with when I'm working on the stuff with most of my clients. There's no argument about creative vision or stuff like that. So it's a lot of long hours. It's not easy work, but at the end of the day, when you see something online, Toys R Us, which doesn't exist anymore, or Amazon, or even now, like I think seeing people line up to get stuff at Comic-Con is very satisfying, and it's something I'll never take for granted.
Well, Harry, this has been an absolutely amazing chat. We're super thankful you took the time to be with us today. We do have we have a tradition here on the show. So before we let you go, we have a question that we ask all of our guests. Dave, would you like to fulfill your role as this podcast's James Lipton and ask our final question?
I would. Harry, the last question that we ask all of our guests. What is your favorite and/or strangest piece in your collection? It can be one of each, or it can be both.
Something I've worked on or something in my collection?
You know what? I think for the sake of this conversation, let's go something you worked with.
Okay.
One of my clients is Ripley's Entertainment, and they're really proud of their oddities. So maybe on a different podcast conversation, we'll talk a little bit about that, because I think the thing that I worked on isn't quite out yet. It's something helping with a location property at their Gatlinburg attraction, but their stuff is the stuff that they have me do. The subject matter is odd, and they're proud of it. The Ripley's brand, and being another one of those people that watch the TV show. Back in the day in reruns with Jack Palance as the host, and even later on with Dean Cain. But I think probably the oddest request I ever got as an artist, I was working with this ornament company, and whatever that, most of it was Santa Claus, reindeer, elves, whatever it may be, gingerbread house. They just say, hey, we've got these ideas, we want, really quick turnaround. They wanted stuff really quick. And then one year they were like, we have some stuff. And so there was the whole warning, basically what you're about to see, is, for kids 13 and whatever, 18 and older, whatever. They're like, they gave me the disclaimer and basically prepared me for the conversation. Like, we have an adult line of holiday ornaments that we would like you to do. And they said, we understand if it's something that's out of your whatever, comfort zone or whatever it may have been. I'm like, they gave me a couple ideas. The first one, it was like sexy Mrs. Santa, leathered up chaps Santa Claus. I'm like,
leather daddy Santa. All right.
So I was like, okay, I can go. That's not too out of hand. But then after I turned those in, then some of the requests were like Santa and the elves or the reindeer were involved. I'm like, no, this is that. Yes. That was where I'm like, and they were cool about it. They're like, yeah, we understand. And I think it was more of a place of humor, I guess. But some of it was like, my kids walk in and they see that on my screen, they're not going to understand. I cannot explain that one away.
Fair enough. I think leather daddy Santa is going to be enough for people to kind of chew on. I think that's that's a good spin on the answer to that question. We've gotten a lot of things, honestly, tying back to your love for Planet of the Apes. One of our previous guests, Marty Abrams, the man behind Mego Toys, he has a solid gold Planet of the Apes Mego figure head. That was his answer to the question.
That's the most unique thing he's either worked on or has
in the collection. Yeah, I think it was when they sold X amount of Planet of the Apes figures at some point, like a gift from like the Mego company to Marty, was they took the mold for was it Caesar?
I believe it was Caesar.
Yeah, so they molded him a solid gold Mego Caesar head. And I have a sinking suspicion Harry is about to pull out.
One of the oddest things I have.
Oh, okay.
This unfolded. You can barely see it, but where my finger is a Super Bowl logo. If you were at the Super Bowl, whatever year this was, I was there because it was Eagles, Patriots. If you got your drinks, you got your drink served on this tray. Here's I guess your popcorn. I'm not going to unfold it, but you can kind of
Simpsons tray.
So they handed it to you, all put together with your drinks and stuff in it. I was able to ask someone working there, for just a couple dollars tip, like, could I have one of those unfolded? And
right on.
I was told like by kickoff they were already all gone. So I don't know how that happens. I mean, not halftime, like by kickoff. So my guess is there was people that they either didn't make enough or they were disappearing. But all my years looking on eBay, I've never seen the Simpsons Super Bowl. This is 2005 awesome. On the back box on the back. I'm guessing the game was on Fox or whatever, but yeah, you can see somewhere right below there is the Super Bowl logo.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And not the greatest thing in my collection. I've got prototypes and test shots, and I've got a couple things I don't want to get into how I got them. But since you brought that up, it was always in the back of my mind is like, if there's a Simpsons fan out there that has seen that, like, oh yeah, I've got that, or whatever the story may be behind it, but you see, you guys have collected for a while.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that you've seen. I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that. One of the things I think is neat that I would love to have and talked about Hasbro about redoing it was, I think. I forget what the toy company was, but it was like a dollar store toy of a Ghost Rider on it. You pulled the string and the cycle would go, but it had a little rubber Johnny Blaze head and a rubber Ghost Rider head, and it was like the rack toys. I'm like,
oh yeah,
cool to do that. And you see them on eBay rarely, and when they do, it's like a couple $1,000s. So
wow,
they were it was like one of the ripcord ones, right?
Yeah.
The friction.
If my memory is correct, or there was the Fun Stuff did the Hulk in his rage cage, and you squeeze the pump, and he'd inflate and break out,
burst out of the cage. Yep.
Well, they also did the Thing, which I guess probably didn't sell that well. If you can find the Thing online, it's worth it's a lot of money. I'll probably never own one, but yeah. So for me, even though it's just a piece of cardboard, it's the one thing that I have in my collection that I haven't seen someone else, show up with. And it's it's the Simpsons, and everyone loves the Simpsons, and who knows? I have it. I just happened to know where it was when you were asking. So there's nothing really bizarre in my collection, and there's some things, like I say, I have because like from being in the industry, much like Marty Abrams. Golden ape head, and then how do you put a price on that? Because it's probably the only one.
Exactly, it's a 101. It is for sure a 101. So, well, listen, Harry, thank you again so much for joining us. Real quick before you leave, please remind our watchers, our listeners, where can they follow you online?
Most everything, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, is Harry Moore Design. Even the website is harrymoredesign.com. I rarely update that because Instagram is instant. Instagram and Twitter are I don't have to come up to my computer and upload this, that. I'm like, I can have something on my phone. It's like, a good example was that when the Ghostbusters stuff, dropped. There's a folder on my phone that has all of these things. It's called Instagram. So as soon as I see Hasbro releases it, I can do a post. The post is already pre-typed. It's ready to. I just have to wait for that clearance. So the best place to see my work is Instagram, Harry Moore Design.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put a link to that in the show notes, in the video description. If you are listening to this, watching this, make sure you give Harry a follow. I mean, like I said, the stuff that we barely tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg.
The surface.
But yeah, Harry, and as always, we tell all of our guests, you're welcome back on anytime. I'm sure there's a whole lot more that we could talk about. But I think we've taken up enough of your time this evening. So,
well, that's the thing with my experience and things that I've done. Not bragging or anything, just like we could have spent one whole podcast on the Spider-Man retro. We could have spent one whole podcast on the Fantastic Four, or just the Marvel retro on games, Monopoly, whatever it is, and you kind of try to cram it all into one, which I understand that, and it's definitely worth if having me come back on in the future. But I think we discussed this in the past, that the timing for this one made sense because of the Ghostbusters drop. You had me in your back pocket, and you knew there was going to be the Comic-Con deal, but we couldn't I couldn't tell you what it was, and then when Hasbro did tease it, you kind of figured it out. And like, yeah, let's do something not too far away from Comic-Con, but close enough. I mean, it's damn near in a month from now, I think. We're a month and a half. So even if you guys don't go, your viewers will. And I know that at least this, I'm not towing the company line, but with the Hasbro stuff, most of it is available on Pulse.
Yep.
I mean, you have to, be there, the next day, but there's Hasbro wants to sell these things. They don't, they're not trying to make it so it's so hard for you to get them. So if you're diligent, you will be able to get everything that, Hasbro does at Comic-Con without going there. I mean, obviously we would all love you to all go to Comic-Con, and but not everyone, has that time. It's a long flight from the East Coast.
Yep.
I only do it once a year, but it's definitely was the right timing for this conversation. Is that we were able to plug the upcoming Ecto stuff, and I think that's if we do this again, which I'm totally up for, is that you and I can just think about, oh yeah, here I'll drop the hint. There's an item coming, and I think we want to talk in February 2026, something like that. So that gives you something relevant, so that we're not just talking about this old dude's history of toy stuff from the 90s and 2000s. It's like we can talk about something that's like you did very well, was the Ghostbusters drop. And this is new and relevant to collectors this moment. Yep.
People love the history, though.
People, don't discount the history.
Don't discount the history.
Look for one last plug for the Ecto Glow Heroes. Look for the Ghostbusters Ecto Glow Heroes and Ecto 1 at San Diego Comic-Con this year, and in limited quantities on HasbroPulse.com after the show. With that, Dave, send us home.
Yeah, don't discount your history, but love your present stuff too.
Excellent.
Thank you, dear listener, for hanging out with us today. Subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen, and then tell your friends to do it. Thanks also to Joe Azari, the golden voice behind our intro. Our music is Game Boy Horror by the Zombie Dandies. Find more about them both in our show notes.
Follow us on social media at AIC_podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Stop by and say hi, show us your toy hauls, and share your toy stories. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode.
Don't try this at home. Void where prohibited and some assembly required. Each sold separately, not a flying toy. Consult a physician if your toy run exceeds more than 4 hours.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.